these conferences, was a little series, is Pascendi. It's going to be Pascendi, essentially Pascendi. I have a kind of nervous tic about explaining Pascendi. 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 Because I think it's crucial. The world is going mad, and the church was going mad. It was going mad at the time of Pius X, and he stopped it for a while. He gave the church a reprieve of 50 years, from 1907, when Pascendi appeared, until 1958, when Pius XII died. But the church has went mad immediately afterwards in Vatican II. It's been going madder and madder ever since. What is going on? Why? Well, Pius XII essentially nailed it, as they say. He nailed it in 1907. And if you want to get a handle on why the world is so crazy as it is, you can't do better than Pascendi. Only it's tough. It's not that easy. So it's well worth taking some time, including a whole of a Saturday, and conclusion on Sunday, to get under the bonnet of Pascendi. It's well worth it. Okay, and it's the series, the slide of the SSPX in its historical context. What's going on with the Society of Pius X today? It's sliding. It hasn't yet crashed, but everything suggests that it's going to crash. Going to crash into the bosom of the conciliar church. So what you've got is at the bottom, everything in green is good for go, red is bad for stop. And what you've got is the advance in time. The time goes up the page, as you see in the column of blue figures on the left. Time goes up the page. So what you see is the red expanding, expanding, expanding up the page, and the green diminishing, diminishing, diminishing. Means that the world has been getting more and more rotten. This is in various stages. So what the slide of the SSPX, then immediately under the slide of the SSPX, you've got a second line. Age, major stages of the great apostasy, clashes, the church is rearguard action, straight line to heaven, heaven's shrinking agents. Okay, let's have a look. The age, well, you've seen that in the blue figures. You see the blue figures climbing in time to the 21st century. In red, what you've got underneath in red is the major stages of the great apostasy. So the apostasy has been piling up over centuries and centuries. The apostasy didn't start yesterday. It's reaching its climax today, but it didn't start yesterday. You've then got clashes in cross swords. When I was a boy at school, I learned that clashes cross swords meant a battle. So you've got various battles. You've got these. You can hardly see the little black crosses, but they do exist. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got there down the page. So there are clashes between the church and the enemies of the church. Enemies of the church on the left and the church on the right. The other side of the clash is the church's rearguard action. It seems to be a depressing way of looking at what the church is doing, but the church, in fact, has been in a rearguard action, and there's a defensive action, retreating, with some very successful counterattacks like the Counter-Reformation, but basically the church has been on the retreat ever since the Middle Ages. The straight line to heaven is that big green arrow, which is as straight as an arrow, as they say. It's as straight as an arrow because it's the line to heaven. It doesn't deviate, it doesn't change. It's yesterday, today, and tomorrow, yesterday, today, and forever, says St. Paul. That's the line that the church needs to be following. And then it's a straight line to heaven. Whereas, as you can see with the red arrows bend all down to hell. And the bottom left-hand corner, you've got hell in red, of course. So you've got hell bottom left and heaven top right, so to speak. Heaven's shrinking agents. The defenders of the faith, the defenders of the church, have been getting smaller and smaller. So don't be surprised if the resistance today is just a handful. Tomorrow it's going to be even fewer. Don't be surprised. It goes with the territory, as Americans say. So the shrinking heavens, shrinking agents, you can see that with the problem of Protestantism in the 16th century, the counterattack was, the Catholic reaction was a whole council. In other words, all the bishops of the church, or a selection of the bishops of the church, Council of Trent, the Great Council of Trent, which established the fortress church to defend itself against Protestantism, which was the beginning of the end. Then after the whole council, you had the next stage was liberalism, which culminated in the French Revolution, which burst out in the French Revolution of 1789. And there you have several popes who counterattacked against the French Revolution. You then got, in 1900, modernism. And the counterattacker was St. Pius X, and he's one pope. So you see, a whole council, a mass of bishops, several popes, one pope is diminishing all the time. Then the counterattack with Vatican II, which was a gigantic onslaught on the faith, the counterattack was one archbishop, not even a pope. The popes were the worst delinquents. Pope John the 23rd, Pope Paul VI, Pope John Paul I, Pope John Paul II, Benedict the 16th, and now Francis. They're the main agents of the problem. It's extraordinary that should be so, but it's normal for the end of times. It's normal for the end of the world. How could the end of the world happen? Unless the church was lifted off its hinges? The church had to be destroyed for the end of the world to be able to take place. So don't be surprised. And then after the archbishop, it's a minuscule resistance in inverted commas. It's not an archbishop. It isn't organized. It's a bunch of independent, free-ranging, mutually attacking priests. Let's face reality. That's what it is today. So minuscule resistance. So heaven's shrinking agents. You can see that the battle is the defense is getting weaker and weaker as time goes on. And tomorrow the resistance will be split again, or it's already pretty split, but it's going to be split again. If it gets any consistency, it's almost sure, if God doesn't intervene by then, the resistance will split again. So, now I'll go back to the bottom. The Church of the Middle Ages is all green from left to right. The Church occupied all civilization at that time. All civilization was Catholic, the Church occupied all civilization. Then Protestantism split Christendom. 1/3 of Christendom went with Protestantism, and it clashed. There were a series of wars, the wars of the Fronde in France, the 30 Years' War in Germany, the Civil War in England, all the same essentially. It's always the enemies of Christ against Christ. And Brexit today is, I'm sure, that it is the relics of Christianity, the relics of Christian England against the New World Order. In other words, it's the enemies and friends of God. But no Brexiters, no pro-Brexiters nor anti-Brexiters still think of God, therefore they don't see what it's all really about. But it's really about the crushing of what remains of the old order by the New World Order, which is Christ against the Jews. Or Christ against the New World Order led off by the Jews, but with a mass of Gentiles taking part. And the Brits don't see, it's an ancient, a sound, ancient, patriotic British instinct which is rising up against Europe. And on the other side, it's all of those who want the New World Order, who want prosperity, who want money, who want Europe to do our governing for us. That's Brussels, But they don't see, nobody sees it clearly because they don't understand that God, nobody takes seriously God any longer. But that's what it's about. So that's again the same red against the same green, except in poor old Britain it isn't Catholic any longer, that's for sure. But it's vestigially Christian, I would say. But nobody will phrase the debate in those terms, and therefore nobody can understand what it's all really about. They're all fuddling around. It's like a battle taking place in dusk where nobody knows really where the enemy is and what he's up to. But the enemy is pretty clear. It's the New World Order, which is going to have everybody in hell if it possibly can. Protestant splits Christendom. 1/3 goes Protestant, 2/3 go Catholic, and there's and wars all over Europe. Finally, the Peace of Westphalia acknowledges in 1684, 1648. 1648, the Peace of Westphalia. The Catholics have to admit we have to settle for a peace. It's not an ideal peace. The Pope was against, but that meant that the Protestants were established opposite the Catholics established. So then the Masonry came along and said, we are superior to Catholicism and Protestantism. We are the religion we are higher than religion. We are for all men together. Forget about doctrine. Forget about doctrine. That's Masonry. In fact, damn doctrine. They hate dogma. They don't want dogma. They absolutely don't want dogma. The Catholic Church absolutely should want dogma. But the Catholics are too dopey to realize, and of course they've no longer got shepherds telling them the truth. Most Catholics are too dopey to recognize the importance of doctrine. So even many Catholics, all that matters is love. All you need is love. Doing with the Beatles, you may remember. All you need is love. No. You cannot possibly have true charity without true faith beforehand. But that's another story. That's another conference. Liberalism. And you get a series after the French Revolution. You've got the liberals. The Freemasons grabbed the state, but they can't yet get the church. The idea was to topple both the throne and the altar. They got the throne. They guillotined Louis XVI, as they had axed Charles I in England, but they don't yet get the church. The church puts up a fight, and by a series of anti-liberal popes. Almighty God in his mercy gives the church a series of decent popes who've got doctrine, and they cause, I jumped a line there, after the Counter-Reformation, the tremendous counterattack of Trent, there was a tremendous missionary extension of the church, for instance, a rosary of nations in Latin America, by the Portuguese and the Spaniards. The Spaniards that had the Inquisition, thanks to the Inquisition, they had no Protestantism worth speaking of. And that gave them the tremendous impulse of Catholicism to create a rosary of nations with the Portuguese in South America and Central America. The first university in Mexico was founded years before Harvard in the United States. But the Protestants have taken over, so to speak. A tremendous mission extension. So the church, but then the liberals come in and they take the state, they leave the church. The church has to has to restate the ancient doctrine, the ancient Catholic doctrine, which has always been there, but it needs to be restated in the face of the French Revolution. And it's restated above all. There is a new missionary expansion with the Catholic counterattack against liberalism, especially in Africa. But the doctrine is steadily restated in a series of what are called encyclicals. An encyclical comes from the Greek word like cycle. Cycle is a wheel in Greek, kuklos. And an encyclical is a document coming from the Pope which has to do the cycle of the bishops. So it's a document designed for the bishops of the world. It's going to go the round of the bishops. That's what an encyclical is. And the encyclicals, the Catholic encyclicals of the 19th century were a series lasting a little over 100 years, from Gregory XVI, no, maybe earlier than Gregory XVI, 150 years, let's say, from the time of the French Revolution through to Pius XII, and then the encyclicals are finished. Now encyclicals with the new popes, the encyclicals are ridiculous, just doctrinally confused. They're a mess. So the great series is finished. It finished with Pius XII. But those encyclicals, that's why you got them circled in purple. They're very important. And the greatest of those encyclicals, the most important, is Pascendi, and the longest, the most difficult, the greatest, the most important, and with which unlocks the madness of today. You see if that statement is true by Sunday midday. Then St. Pius X counterattacks, especially against modernism. Modernism is a small movement. It's only a small number, but potent in poison. It's a deadly heresy. St. Pius X will call it the gutter, the main sewer that collects the muck from all possible heresies of the past, or all heresies of the past, all possible heresies of the future. Everything. You'll see why. It's a recipe for total and continual madness. You'll see why. But so it's a small number, but it's very dangerous. And Pius X cries wolf and scotches it with, as above all, not only with Pascendi but with other drugs, and then with measures. He had not only a very good mind, he was a peasant stock. He had a pile of common sense, and he also had a wrist. He was not soft, and he hit the bad guys where it hurt them. He was a great saint. Obviously a great gift of God at that moment in time. So there a missionary effort. That's where Pascendi comes in. And St. Pius X gave the church, I said, a reprieve of 50 years. That's the background of Pascendi. That's the lead up to Pascendi, from Protestantism to liberalism. Liberalism is thanks to Protestantism, as you see there. Protestantism splits Christendom. Liberalism is thanks to Protestantism, because here's Protestantism, here's Catholicism. Liberalism comes in and pretends to be superior to both. If there hadn't been Protestantism, liberalism couldn't have pretended it was superior to Catholicism, because Catholicism was obviously the truth. Nobody seriously contested it. But then Luther seriously contested it, and from that moment on, we're off to the races. Liberalism thanks to Protestantism, modernism thanks to a world molded by Protestantism and liberalism. The world is going rotten by the 1900, and a warning sign came from God, the sinking of the Titanic in 1912. You think you're all that smart, you moderns, with your technology and your science and your industry and your atheism? Well, just take one look. Nobody could sink this ship. Or what was the boast? I think the Protestants painted in white, God himself couldn't sink this ship, something like that. First journey, maiden journey, finishes 5 miles underwater at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Modernism, thanks to a world molded by Protestant liberalism and in dead trouble, heading straight for the First and Second World Wars. The world is in chaos. It's only a very small number. The very large number of Catholics stay with Pius X. There's a sharp clash over Pascendi, but Pius X prevails. The bad guys simply go underground, and they wait for their moment. They know that time is on their side. They know that history is working, that the corruption is advancing and working all the time, and they're just going to wait for the moment when they'll be able to come up again. And that moment came with the death of Pius XII. Vatican II, immediately after the death of Pius XII, Vatican II, or Neo-Modernism, the revival of modernism. Exactly the same heresy, basically, but revived, thanks to a world of hearts and minds corrupted in depth by Protestantism, liberalism, and modernism. So you can see how the red guys are building one on top of the other. Liberalism builds on Protestantism, modernism builds on liberalism, and Vatican II builds on all three. There's the council, which this time doesn't take just a small number of Catholics. It sweeps off the great majority of Catholics because the Pope is with the council. The Pope is on the side of the modernists. Tradition just manages to get itself together. There's quite a strong reaction all over the world, a reaction led mainly and outstandingly by Archbishop Lefebvre, a very great churchman, man of the church. And he engineers yet another counteraction expansion, and that's the worldwide expansion of the Society of Pius X. Remarkable years, the 1970s, 1980s, and he died in 1991, but the impulse continued through the 1990s, but the villains were already at work, the termites were already at work underneath, liberals inside the society. I knew them. I knew them. I won't name them, but they've been working in, they didn't basically agree with the Archbishop. They never really understood the Archbishop. They were too young, too modern. Too much of the modern age in their veins to understand the Archbishop, and so they were preparing to change the society even before he died. Several years before he died, and once he was dead, then off to the races, and it was simply a matter of time before we reached 2012, which is a general chapter of the society, in which the push towards Rome prevailed. Thanks mainly to Bishop Foley. Bishop Foley is a wolf in sheep's clothing, but if you watch that dreadful TV interview with Tim Sebastian, the English Jew working in Germany, if you watch that dreadful interview, I mean well, I want everybody to be nice. I love everybody. I want everybody to love me. You're a horrible interviewer, but I love you. Oh. Is that what the church was built by? Is that the kind of thing that the church was built by? The church was built by young girls standing up to the emperor and saying, Your Majesty, if you can promise me all the handsome young men you like and all the limousines you like. You can promise me the richest house in Rome. You can promise me, but I'm sorry, you're worshipping devils, and I've got to say that, and you're worshipping devils. How dare you say that? I will torture you. Your Majesty, you must torture me how you like, how you think fit. You're the head of the state. Go ahead. Be my guest, they would say today in America. And the girls got tortured, and they went straight to heaven. They had an unpleasant quarter of an hour, half an hour, month, I don't know, 2 months, but they went straight to heaven. They died for our Lord. That's what's built the church, not this silly compromising, stupid softness. Oh. So the SSPX push towards the Rome Agreement, thanks to priests weakened by the modern world. Pius X was a peasant, and he had some common sense. Your suburbanites, we suburbanites, I'm a suburbanite, we suburbanites in mass don't have common sense. We're detached from reality. The washing machine does it all for mum. Diesel oil does it all for dad. Nobody's in touch with hard, demanding reality any longer, or too few people in touch with hard, demanding reality, and therefore we're all off to Fantasyland. Alice was in Wonderland, and the society is in Wonderland. Bishop Wanda is now going to be the next bishop of the society, he's a novice order bishop. He means well, he's a nice guy. He's a friend of Pope Francis, excuse me. I was just going to say Frankie. He's a friend of Pope Francis. Oh, they're all nice, but they're no good as Catholics, because being nice to men sooner or later means being nasty to God. It's more important to be nice to God than to be nice to men. But people today just don't have that kind of a faith. They haven't got this. They don't have a sense of reality, and they don't have a sense of God. If you don't have a sense of reality, how can you have a sense of the real God? If reality means nothing to you, how can the real God mean anything to you? So how can these moderns, these suburbanites, as I say, who live a soft and easy life as suburbanites, although heaven knows commuting is demanding enough on it, can be demanding enough on its own, and the contamination of the air in the big cities is unpleasant enough. But nevertheless, there's nothing in their lives which gives them that solid good sense and that peasants used to have. Peasants have all kinds of faults, but at least they've got some common sense, and they can have the faith. The faith in modern suburbs, it won't go. It won't go. And of course, Ireland's now turning suburbanite. It was peasant, it's turning suburbanite, same thing happening. England has been industrial and suburbanized the longest, and it's the most corrupt. So anyway, you see there what led up to Pascendi and what followed Pascendi, because the church didn't follow Pius X, the church followed John the 23rd and Paul VI. Okay, put that to one side. Now turn to the sheet with Pascendi, the heart of the matter. Now, this is the encyclical itself, a very inadequate summary or synopsis, an overview, enabling you to see the whole thing on just 2 sheets. Look at sheet 1, Pascendi overview, and then sheet 2 is the heart of the matter. Sit next to one another so that everybody can get an eyeful. You've got 5 sections of this encyclical. You've got an introduction. You've then got a long section of doctrine, a short section of causes, a shortish section of remedies, and a shortest of all conclusion. Pretty simple. Introduction, conclusion, framing, doctrine, causes, remedies. The sheet 2 is an elaboration, a closing in. What do you say on the computer? You call it a zooming in. You zoom in on the first part of the section of doctrine. Turn to sheet 1 again. You see the doctrine divides into 7, and with a conclusion. Modernist philosopher, 2 believer, 3 theologian, 4 historian, 5 critic, 6 apologist, 7 reformer, and then the conclusion. Okay. Then you see that on sheet 1, philosopher, believer, and theologian are in a box entitled "The Heart of the Matter." See over. So you should be able to turn over the page, and on the other side of the page you would find sheet 2. Sheet 2, you see then, is doctrine. It's all doctrine, virtually all doctrine, with in 3 sections. Section 1, the philosopher, from 6 to 13, the believer from 15 to 18, and then the theologian from 19 to 28. That is the heart of the matter. That is the guts of the encyclical. That's the most important part of the encyclical. Okay, now what you see then is what you're seeing in front of you is doctrine, let's say that's like that, and then causes and remedies. Now obviously the causes, what are we talking about? The causes of what? The causes of this doctrine. So the causes section refers back to doctrine. Similarly, remedies. Remedies of what? Remedies of this doctrine. So those 2 sections refer back to the doctrine. The doctrine breaks down into philosopher. That's phi in Greek for ph, for philosopher. The philosopher, the believer, the theologian, that's theta in Greek, the first letter of the word Greek word for God, and the first letter of the Greek word for theologian, theologos, the reasoning about God. That's the theologian. Then there is the historian, the apologist, and the reformer, with a conclusion. Now, the believer in what? First, Pascendi has put philosopher at the beginning. So this is a problem of philosophy. For the philosophy is at the root of it. At the root of what? The root of what the modernist believes. So the believer is referring back to the philosopher. The theologian derives from the philosopher. The historian and the apologist and the reformer, they're all deriving from the philosopher. So the important section in doctrine is the philosopher. Then the philosopher, you see, is the principles and their application. Well, what are you applying? you are applying these principles. So we're zeroing in on principles. Now, the principles are positive and negative. Sorry, that's got that the wrong way round. Hold on. Why have I got it wrong the way round? Because before you put up a new skyscraper, you've got to put a bulldozer into the building site. You've got to clear the building site. So the negative principles clear the ground, and then the positive principles start building. So then the positive principles work from the negative principles. So fear, in the section on the negative principles, here you've got the heart of the heart of the heart of the encyclical. Everything basically is deriving from here. Once you get hold of this, you've got the key to the whole of the encyclical. If you can understand this section, which is not all that long, you'll immediately understand the positive principles, you'll understand their application, you will then not grasp the philosophy. That will give you the key to the believer, to the theologian, to the historian, and you'll see how the rest of the encyclical derives. Then, what we need to look at is those principles. But let's start with the introduction. So sheet 1, overview, the beginning of the beginning of the encyclical. What you've got down the middle of the page is a series of figures, and these figures are the paragraphs of the original text of the encyclical. But be careful, paragraphing in different editions, the paragraphing is different, so the numbering is different. But if you get an edition of the original encyclical with where the numbering doesn't seem to correspond, you'll soon find where you are. You should be able to find, without too difficult, where you actually are, because by the time you reach the end of the encyclical, it may be the difference between 55 and 60 paragraphs, or 50 and 55. It won't be a huge difference, and Pius X signposts the main sections, which you should be able to follow, even if the numbering is different in the edition you have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. The introduction. 1. We popes must guard the faith and feed the flock. To feed, Latin, is pasco pascere. Pascendi then comes from the word to feeding. Feeding the flock is the Pope's business. So, and he's got to feed the Catholic flock when it's being led into poisonous, when it's in grave danger of being led into poisonous pastures. That's why Pius X is going to smash modernism as best he can. Then he says, paragraph 2, especially today, the enemy is within. The enemy is within, and that's the problem of Vatican II and the problem of the Church today. The main enemies of the Church are the modernist clergy. And they're good guys. This is the problem. They're nice guys, like Bishop Foley. But he's a hopeless modernist. He just doesn't take doctrine seriously. He knows it because he learned it at the seminary. But he doesn't take it seriously. It doesn't mean anything to him. The mind is mush. The mind is not strengthened, and it doesn't have, a steel frame like Catholic doctrine. It's just mush, but it's so nice. If you've got a steel frame, you can't be nice. You've got to say it as it is if you've got a steel frame in your mind. But if you want to be nice, forget about steel. So his mind is mush. The enemy is within. The enemy was within, inside the Society of St. Pius X. And he was there before the Archbishop died. And he was at work before the Archbishop died. All of these youngsters, these suburban youngsters, must have been, actually, Father Schmeber is of peasant stock, German peasant stock. He should have known better. But he's infected with suburbanism. I would, if I wanted one word to name it, I would say suburbanism. But he wasn't a suburbanite. The enemy is within. He's right inside, and the Pope yells at the top of his head. He is, and then paragraph 3, you've got a portrait of the modernist. He's intimate, he's right inside, he's disguised, he's radical, he strikes at the root of the faith, says Pius X. He's disguised, he pretends to be a nice guy. The trouble is that we are so perverse in the 20th and 21st centuries that the poisonous guys are nice, and the niceness deceives themselves. They don't realize if they finish by having no idea of just how poisonous they themselves are. How do you get through to them? The Jewish interviewer tries to nail Bishop Foley, but it's like fighting a fog with a sword, or like driving a pin through a piece of jelly. There's nothing there. And he's convinced that he's a good guy. He really is convinced he's a good guy. And he's typical. Poor Bishop Foley. He's audacious. He will stop at nothing. He doesn't mind blaspheming uphill and down dale, drawing conclusions like Jesus can't possibly be God because there is no God. He's outwardly correct, and that obviously deceives people. So the modern church has inherited outward correctness, but inwardly there's nothing there. It's just a big blank. Interestingly, St. Paul, in one of his epistles, prophesies exactly that. The appearance of religion without the substance. It's in, I think it's 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 3. He said, it's a portrait of men of modern times. Read it. Very interesting. 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 to 8, I think it is. Outwardly correct, disobedient. So, you know, he's very, very nice, but he doesn't obey. And Pius X goes on to say, leniency is proved ineffective. I've tried to be nice with these people, but it's no effect. Now we've got to strip off the mask. We've got to show them for who they are. And what they are is disbelievers, with the appearance of belief, but the substance is gone. And we'll see exactly why the substance is gone. And that's exactly what he's going to give. So he says, here, that's what we've got in Pascendi 4. Hence Pascendi. Modernism's teaching, that's the first main section, doctrine. Then its causes, 40 to 43. And then its remedies, 44 to 56. So you can see where he's drawn a portrait of the modernist. He's sketched swiftly but very, very accurately the danger of modernism. Modern man is so corrupt and so perverse that he considers he's a saint when he's absolutely, objectively, completely rotten. Maybe he still has goodwill. Maybe that goodwill counts in front of God. But objectively, he's destroying the church because it's a parody of Catholicism. How can that be? Well, turn now to sheet 2. Principles. We've got the philosopher, the believer and theologian on sheet 2, and then absolutely continuously the historian, critic, apologist and reformer on sheet 3, which you can see that the philosopher, believer and theologian are the ones that are really important. Okay, the philosopher. He's working on certain principles, negative and positive, and then he immediately begins applying these principles. The faith is going to become something completely different. That's why he's got it in inverted commas. The same word, the appearances, the same words, but content completely different. Revelation, same word, a good Catholic word, content completely different. Supernatural, a very precise Catholic word, but for the modernist, completely different. Dogma, again, same word. So what you've got, imagine, is a comparison. Imagine a robber raiding a pharmacy at night when the pharmacist is gone. and he empties out all the little bottles of pills on the floor because he's trying to find some particular pill of a certain color, whatever it is. He empties them all out in a heap on the floor. And then he realizes that, he'd better put the pills back. So he puts the pills back in the bottles higgledy-piggledy before he leaves. He takes the pills he wants, whatever, when he finds them, and he puts pills back in bottles regardless of whether it's the right pill in the right bottle. The pharmacist comes back in the morning, all the pills are still there on the shelves, because the robber has put them all back on the shelves. It all looks just like it looked when he left it the previous evening, but it's completely different. You've got every single bottle has changed its content. So the appearance is the same, but the content is completely different. That's what modernism does to Catholicism. That's why Vatican II has been followed by a completely new religion. It's the religion of man in the place of the religion of God. It's no longer man worshipping God. It's God being made to turn around and worship man. What? Yes, that's what it is. That's what it is, and that's how different it is. It's the exact reverse. That's why you get the priest facing the people instead of facing God on the altar. Why the priest is talking the language of television instead of the Latin language of God. Those are just two very simple, concrete examples of the turn away from God, the turn towards man. All right, then we've got the that's the application of the principles. The principles are negative and positive. Positive is vital immanence. We'll come to that. Vital means of life. Immanence means remaining within. And the negative principle, and here is where you've got a hydrogen bomb. Phenomenism, agnosticism. Those two serious errors. You can call it phenomenist agnosticism or agnostic phenomenism, whichever you like. Agnosticism means I don't know. It's in Greek. Atheist is no God. In Greek is, at the beginning of a word, is liable to mean privation of. Theos is God. So atheist is somebody who privates God, who gets rid of God, doesn't believe in God. Agnosticism is somebody who doesn't know. Gignoskine in Greek is no, and therefore agnostic is somebody who does not know, or pretends he does not know. Phenomenism is another Greek word. It comes from phainomai in Greek, which means appear. So phenomena is appearances. Phenomenism is the doctrine that we only know appearances, that we can't get beyond the appearances. Phenomenology is a school of philosophy whereby, following Kant, whereby we can't get beyond the appearances. So what you see amongst the phenomenologists is a desperate effort to remake, to fabricate again, to fabricate a substance out of the mere appearances. Because, thank you. What you've got is if here is a tree, these are the appearances. The green of the leaves and the brown of the trunk. Those are the appearances, and the rustling of the leaves in the wind, the rustling of the tree in wind is an appearance to my ears. The green and the brown is an appearance to my eyes. If I go up and hug the tree like a good ecologist, then I get touchy-feely with the tree. That's another appearance through the sense of touch. If I love the tree to the point of licking it, well, then I get taste of the tree. And what's the last sense? Or five.
See, smell, taste, and touch.
Smell. If I go up to the trunk, and so the appearances are the appearances not only to the eye but to all five senses. Behind the appearances is the substance. We'll get into this, but and the substance is a different matter. Okay. Now, there's just time. I don't know how many of you have seen this before. If you've seen this before, don't yell. Just let others rack their brains over it. What is this? How many of you have seen this one? Okay, okay. It's not very complicated, but it is a value. It's a valuable thing. Okay, now, what we've got here is 8 lines. 2 are slanted, and the other 6 are a square with a cross lines. What is that? Everybody is seeing exactly the same. The eyes, all of everybody, are seeing exactly the same lines. So the eyes have done their work. The eyes say 6 lines and then a number of little squiggles. But it doesn't answer the question, what is it? Is it anything? Answer, it's a giraffe walking past a window. Okay? Now there again, the lines are appearances to the senses. The senses pick up the lines. But what it is, the whatness is different. It's picked up by the mind. What is it? You could call it the whatness. It's also called the essence. It's also called the substance. Those are technical words which all have their special meaning. Whatness is an invention, but whatness says in English what the words essence and substance say in Latin. The mind picks up the substance. The substance speaks to the mind. The senses speak to the appearances speak to the senses. And there's two different, and those two things, the sensation and intellection, which is the activity of the intellect, the intellection and sensation are two different, compose human knowing. Human knowing is very complicated because human beings are very complicated. Human beings are very complicated because they have both spirit and matter. They are both, they're spiritual like the angels. Man is also material like the dogs. Therefore, man alone has all the faculties of an angel plus all the faculties of a dog. The dogs don't have the faculties of the angels don't have the faculties of the dogs. Only man combines the two. How the two combine is very mysterious, but they obviously do. I'm all the time picking up color, and this, I say, it's a shelf. I know it's a shelf. This is the case of shelves. The mind tells me. These are little plastic stops to hold up the shelves. That this is a statue. The great blue is of the Mother of God. These are flowers. My mind is constantly reading inside, reading on the other side. I look at these appearances of brown and green. I say, this is a tree. The substance is a tree. The senses don't tell me it's a tree. The senses only tell me brown and green. Therefore, the correct way of understanding human knowledge is to recognize that it is a composite of sensation and intellection. It's enough for now. There's mass in the chapel at 6:30. Off you go.